You are live. According to YouTube, good evening, friends. Merry Christmas, first and foremost, to one and to all. Hope you're having a safe and pleasant time with your friends and families, although it can't be that good if you're here with us. But nonetheless, hopefully there's some holiday spirit to go around. And I'm joined by the Duck, of course. How are you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. You know, growing up in Moscow, our Christmas type of thing is always very weird. So Santa Claus doesn't exist. We have Ded Moroz, which is Father Frost, and he brings presents on New Year, right? So obviously it's to do with Orthodox Christianity in Russia being the main denomination of that faith. So Christmas is just a bit different. So the actual Christmas is later in January, but then the whole festive end of year, whatever, is Nowy God, New Year. So it's a bit of a weird one.
Yeah, I like it though. Father Frost.
Father Frost, yeah, and obviously he's got like a hot wife, Snegurочка, who's this like absolute, you know, all these fat Westerners have Mrs. Claus, and she's like a non-character. Whereas we've got Father Frost, and I don't know how to translate the second one, who's basically just like a retired hot, some sort of ice rink model. If you look at most interpretations, so yeah, Ded Moroz and Snegurочка is the combo that we've got going. So yeah. How about you? What's the plan? You kind of on your lonesome?
Yeah, I mean, it's been yesterday. I've been with friends basically, or like basically with the family of like one of my best friends.
Nice.
And then the days before, spent with my family. So yeah, pretty chill. Nothing really too exciting because I mean, it's not really allowed to have any fun right now.
Yeah,
so
for sure. Yeah.
But it's all good. It's all good. Next year's gonna be better.
I fucking hope so, man. I hope it's not one of those things like in markets where it nukes and you're like, oh, thank God that's over, and then it nukes another 50%.
Oh yeah.
Just hope it's not the life cycle taking that sort of form, you know.
Yeah, I'm hoping for the trend reversal instead of continuation.
This has to be capitulation, right? Lockdown number 8, tier number 20. Like, come on.
It has to,
We're so oversold.
And I mean, it's now going into the crypto markets. Like first, everything in the real world collapses, and now XRP does.
Yeah,
so
shit. Well, we're going to talk about XRP, but first and foremost, thank you to Bybit for supporting Technical Roundup and sponsoring the live stream. We wanted to spend Christmas with our families, but then the electric collar we wear around our necks got a buzz, so we knew we had to live stream. So here. That's not true, obviously. But thank you to Bybit for supporting us and sponsoring Technical Roundup. Be sure to visit their links in the description if you'd like to support the show, and like the video if you haven't already. And again, thank you for spending your time with us. Hopefully, whether it be positive or negative, we provide some entertainment and information, because we were just discussing this before the call. For a Christmas Day live stream, it's certainly been a busy week and literally busy day. So that's very quintessentially crypto, I suppose. No days off allowed. 1 inch, Ripple, Bitcoin breaks all-time high. That's insane, right? All on Christmas Day. Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah, that's insane. I mean, I've not really followed today. Didn't really follow yesterday either, but I mean, I've just seen the charts and yeah. Interesting stuff happening.
Have you not been following? I'm the one with like 70 cyberpunk hours in like in like 4 days.
Like I said, I've been with like at other people's places. So like,
you don't hide in the toilet to check prices on your phone when you're.
I used to back when I was like all in.
Yeah.
Like there was literally no like half an hour where I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Now that it's a little bit more reasonably sized, I can kind of go for at least an evening without having to check prices. Because I think there's nothing more rude than like if you're at a dinner or something and you get the phone out and I just do something. Even more if it's like something trivial like checking prices.
At least most of our friends had the decency to go hide in the toilet, right? You'd see like a big nuke incoming, and then immediately in Discord he's like, "Oh my God, I'm like at my grandmother's funeral. What's happening?" It's like, dude.
Yeah, I mean, that's crypto for you.
Right. So where do you want to start? Do you want to actually start with...
I mean, you can start with Bitcoin because that's really quick and easy, I think.
Okay. Do you want to give us your take?
I can, yeah. I mean, my take is pretty much up until it doesn't go up anymore, and then down. But yeah.
What do you think of this breakout? Do you trust it? Do you think it retraces?
Oh, dude, I've been looking at Bitcoin, and I'm like, there's no high time frame resistance. There's no like on the higher time frames. There's no reason to think that we're topping, right? Yeah. The monthly looks good. The weekly looks insane, and then you have the daily, and that's been, I mean, ever since the 17th of December, pretty much, which is funny to me because the 17th of December, we haven't really moved, so it's been going sideways. Pretty weak breakout today. Just from looking at the chart right now, and no real follow through. So, I mean, would I want to long into this breakout? No, but I don't want to short it either. So, like, for me, it's kind of like the action. Like, what you do with Bitcoin is you're just staying in the position that you have, or if you don't have one, you just stay in Bitcoin. That's more than good for me. Mm-hmm. And then I just look at the altcoins and see what's happening there, because I mean, if you want to trade Bitcoin without having, like, it's not really retraced, so you can't get a deep pullback. It's extended quite a bit, so you can't, like, it's pretty difficult to just open a swing in this position and just try to aim higher. So what you're kind of forced to do, in my opinion, or at least that's how I'm treating this, is just waiting till it gives something obvious. And if it doesn't, I mean, I'm used to sitting on my hands. Like, that's completely fine by me. Like, as long as I'm exposed to Bitcoin, I'm fine with it going up. And if it starts breaking down, I think there's quite a bit of room for it to go down without being bearish. And as long as it holds 20K, I think it's good. So that's kind of
reasonable.
My Bitcoin view. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a similar take. Surprise, surprise. I think even if this daily breakout fails, and it's no evidence of that at the moment, and that shouldn't be my working assumption, right? If the trend is so strong and there's no resistance, etc., I generally don't assume that breakouts are for fading, almost by definition. And I think it comes back to this point of bear market or range market PTSD, where you literally had days where every single impulsive candle was a fade, right? Or you get one impulsive candle and then that'll be it. That's the volatility for the day. And if you didn't catch it, then you've got no business trading. Might as well go do something else. In this instance, I mean, oh, where's my light shot? Hold on. In this instance, I mean, looks like a daily time frame. I mean, consolidations on the daily time frame, again, with all the trend preconditions that are set, that isn't just typically bearish. For me, it's like, whatever, it's moving sideways. We've done that before. We have the breakout level. Even if it falls a bit below it, or this breakout fails and it gets back below whatever, 23.8 or 24, whatever that is, as long as the overall range is intact, and this is kind of what it looks like for me, just kind of textbook, highest close, lowest close. As long as we're in this structure is intact, we don't just start nuking off lower, so we just keep making these, because this is a higher high on the daily time frame. That's all it is, right? So within this trend, I'm going to assume there's going to be higher low formed somewhere in the old range. And if it isn't, I agree with your conclusion that there may be some way until the next support, right? Be it somewhere in the middle or 20K, whatever. But one failed breakout or a range breakdown, that doesn't really override what those crazy monthly and weekly charts look like. So yeah, up here, I'm not personally jumping on to follow through on this. It's just not the type of trade that I take. I'm comfortable looking for a higher low somewhere back within the range if it does fail. And if the range breaks down, it'll probably be more of a case of looking to see where the dip ends up to buy it, rather than chasing the breakdown into the 20K retest or whatever it may be. That's at least my view, and I think that's the easier side of the market. You assume that support holds, and if it breaks, you kind of look for the next one instead of looking to short every single whatever red candle or retest that follows. Yeah.
I think a good way to look at it is, like, even if it does start breaking down, right, you look for the dip to buy. Even, like, because let's say this breaks down and then just breaks through 20K and starts looking really bearish, right?
Sure.
You would still want to be, like, buying that first dip, because the first bounce is going to be very significant, right? That's always, like, even if you top on the on the medium time frames, like, let's say we've topped for this year and then the next 2 months after, like, that's a possibility in general, like just having like a 2 or 3 months of break. But even if it does break down, which I'm not saying it will, but even if it does break down and then it goes to like 19K, you want to be buying that dip and then see how the strength, how much strength there is, right? Because if it's just V bottoms out of there, then probably goes just higher, right? So you're better off buying that dip. And then you're not guaranteed, like if you're shorting here, you're not guaranteed that it goes that low. So I think it makes a lot of sense to just, like if it dips, look for the dip to buy at high time or like daily supports anyway. Then it bounces and then you can kind of judge based on the bounce. Okay, do you want to keep the position or do you want to get rid of it and start shorting? Because at that point you can, right? And then you have the luxury of having already had that one trade in the opposite direction, because that's something like when you trade the market in general and you only take like one directional trades, you get stuck in a bias real quick, right? So if you're playing these kind of moves, trade them both ways. It's easier to kind of stay objective, in my opinion. But for me, there's really nothing to like no real setup anywhere close to price. So I just deal with the altcoins, and I've done that for the last few weeks, and it's been pretty fun. Gotta say, altcoins have started being a little bit more volatile again. So
yeah, no, good points. I mean, I agree, and just generally, like looking at your daily chart or even just my version now, these breakouts they've not always been easy, but they've generally held. We haven't had like a big breakout and then a huge bearish engulfing follow through, whatever, right? Yeah, the consolidations on the way up have been like a bit slanted or ugly or whatever, but you know, looking for tops, I just don't think is a particularly fun or productive endeavor with how the market looks right now. The intraday time frame kind of shows what I was talking about in a bit more clearly, whereby we have more or less the top of the range, right, which we've broken out and retesting as support, and that's the daily breakout. And then we've got like the bottom of the range. I'm just eyeballing levels here, like that. So for me, even if this support resistance flip at the moment ends up failing, which isn't my working assumption, but let's say it does, I'm still comfortable punting for some sort of higher low, again on really low time frames if it sets up properly, etc., etc. Like I'm going to assume that support's going to hold until proven otherwise. I think that's a pretty decent framework for this type of trend. And then if support does fail and doesn't turn into some sort of reclaim and legit we just start, nuking from here, well, that's when basically the Donald scenario comes into play. That'll be probably one of the bigger corrections that we've had, and then I'll look to play that first bounce and make an informed decision. As you said, is that a low or high? Am I holding on to this? Do I want to hedge the bounce, etc.? But yeah, there've been plenty of bear traps on the way up, and when you have like literally nothing and thin air above, it's going to be tough to trade on the bearish side. Even in terms of invalidation, it's going to be tough to trade on the bearish side. So why would I make things harder than they need to be? I do think if we get the 20K failure, then I'll be like, oh, for fuck's sake, right? Like if we get strong selling above or into the all-time high retest as a result of well, no, let me correct myself. If we get that type of selling above all-time high to take it back there, I just wouldn't think that's a particularly positive development, as we wrote about on Tuesday as well. So yeah, that's Bitcoin. Breakout, trusting it until proven otherwise. From a high time frame point of view, the only potential red flag would be 20K failure. But I just think this is kind of one of those thin areas where punting too much on leverage is just kind of not worth it. And there are a ton of other opportunities in the market that are risk defined and have levels, have structure, etc. Some of which we'll talk about now, of course. I just don't think it's worth getting liquidated on Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's basically what I think too. Like if you look at XRP, how much it's moved, for example, like there's much better opportunity there.
Yeah.
And then also like with a lot of other altcoins that have just moved bigger, and then you also have some sort of structure to trade. That said, like the wicks that I've seen that happened 2 days ago, kind of mad.
Yes, let's talk about that. So I'm going to bring up XRP BTC first, because that chart had both of them took a bit of a beating. This is what the weekly chart looks like right now.
And
I mean, this is rough, right? This is rough, but it's also quintessential XRP, where you get a huge pump, And then if you try to knife catch anything other than like straight momentum continuation, you usually end up eating shit, right? It's just not nice for those types of trades. And that's why knowing your market and not just blindly transplanting TA techniques is so important. Because some markets will, pull back and then spend 2-3 weeks there and then keep flying. But certain instruments, once you've been in the market enough and you know it, you just know that, you don't catch dips and, the falling knife has no handle, etc., etc. And that's something we wrote about on Tuesday as well. By the way, if anyone has any questions or feedback on the new newsletter format, we'd love to hear from you. But generally, that was our view as well. But had a chance to basically offer bullish continuation from the top of the range, more or less here. And that was the easier path for longs, something like this. Instead, it didn't work out. And it blasted through all the supports on the way down as well on the Bitcoin pair. In terms of where it goes right now, look, I don't know is the answer, especially when you have such strong outside forces like big exchange delistings and stopping trading for specific jurisdictions, high volume jurisdictions, etc. Things get a bit tricky beyond just pure TA, in my opinion, at least in the short term. From a high time frame technical sort of view, generally, and those of you who watch the market structure video will kind of know this type of pattern, right? When you have a high, a low, a higher high, and then it comes down and actually makes a lower low. That tends to be really kind of that's a reversal pattern, right? This was support, that was your move up, should be acting as support on the way down or find some sort of higher low because you made a higher high, right? High, higher high, came from this level, that level fails, so you essentially have this leg, a higher high, resulting in this leg, a lower low. So that combo is typically pretty shitty whenever you have a higher high into a lower low, right?
Yeah.
And that original low level then becomes an area of resistance as well. And that's when you get your basic kind of support turn resistance, but with the added confluence, you add a trap to the upside, which makes it a bit more ugly. So on the weekly chart, again, taking liberties because of all those external factors, etc., I think it wouldn't be unreasonable to maybe look at even this weekly consolidation here, the weeks before this huge pump. And then even if we start bouncing and retracing a lot of this weekly move, which wouldn't be unreasonable, I'd still have that as an area of resistance. And again, it can actually wick this quite significantly. It doesn't have to turn like right at the level. This is weekly structure and after a big move down. So it could trade significantly above it, but I still think that's weekly resistance, and that's probably the biggest obstacle against Bitcoin if we're looking at pure technicals. Do you have any agree, disagree before the USD chart?
The interesting thing about that is that it's actually retested that already on the lower time frames. Right. So yeah, I have like this support zone here too. You have pretty much cycle low. So that's where the big move from XRP started, right? Mm-hmm. In 17. You had that entire huge pump retraced, which already isn't too good news, but we started bouncing from that cycle low. And then you have this kind of move back into it. That is not something that inspires any confidence, like just from a charting perspective. Ignoring all news, I wouldn't want to be buying this. And then you add all these news and what can come still. And I'm just like, okay, I definitely don't want to touch XRP again. I'm very happy with having sold 58 cents. Don't need to touch it when it's like you have this bad news kind of delistings of American exchanges kind of thing looming above your head the entire time. I don't want to be involved in that. So I don't really see, even on a technical kind of view, I don't see much reason to be buying it. So I don't want to. But even like on just the news alone are enough to keep me away. I think there's better opportunities. Then again, like if this nukes like completely, I think there's gonna be a play. But it hasn't, so it just doesn't make much sense to me. Like anything around the old lows, I'd be interested in to like maybe throw some money away, but I don't know. I feel like it's too dangerous to touch this right now. There's some people that are good at trading that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. It's not me. Because like, let's say you're trying to short it down here, right? You're essentially shorting into like a bunch of supports, right? So it's not necessarily a good place to short. But then again, like if you're longing, do you really want to long this when you know that you actually could see Coinbase delist this. Wouldn't be surprising. And I mean, you've seen this recent move down. I don't know if you've seen this before we went live. That I think was Bitstamp.
It was Bitstamp, yeah.
Bitstamp is kind of halting trading for US customers. When you see that kind of stuff, I always, like back in the day, back in 2017, I saw delistings and I saw that kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, it's not a problem. They're going to get relisted somewhere else and it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And in my experience, whenever stuff gets delisted on multiple exchanges, just never goes back to where it once was. Like usually the liquidity fades and people trade it less, and then you're just stuck with the bag basically. So I mean, is Ripple going anywhere? I have no idea. I think this thing is going to take quite a while. It's not something that's just going to go away in like a day or two. Like some people seem to expect like XRP is just going to disappear tomorrow and then it's going to be at zero.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be the case, but I could see it bleed out for weeks and months at a time. Or I could see it squeeze quite a bit higher. But I mean, if I see a squeeze high, and today could have been that day, didn't quite go where I wanted to, then I'm just going to step in, take a short. Only problem is that I can't do it in the new year, so would have had to have been today. So yeah, I'm just not going to touch it. Can't short it, won't long it. That's kind of my view.
I think it's not a terrible idea, as boring as it sounds, to just, I mean, depending on your position, etc., but like broad brush, to do fucking nothing, right? Because you have all these, like, first of all, insane volatility in both the Bitcoin and USD pair. So if you're looking for something clear, then as cliched as it sounds, kind of dust settling makes sense, right? And then especially if you've got this looming, Coinbase wants to IPO, and now the SEC is suing. Already one of the big blue chip exchanges has delisted it for US customers, etc. Like, it's not the most friendly environment for positioning when you've got such price-sensitive headlines potentially flying around, right? So yep. I agree, the Bitcoin pair, I've got resistance at those whatever cycle low levels, even from a market structure point of view. If this, and look, even on the Bitcoin pair, this could retrace like 20-30% and still be bearish, right? So I mean, falling in love with the bounce, which sounds absurd, but I mean, falling in love with the bounce on the Bitcoin pair from a technical point of view might be a bit rough. On the USD pair, I agree. You and I can actually discuss this. I was incredibly surprised by how long this thing actually held up before the nuke. And since we wrote about it on Tuesday, we're like, this support's holding. That's pretty crazy. Because Ripple themselves had at that point published that they knew they were going to get sued, right? And then the market was still holding it, and then just one big old candle like this. And I pretty much share your conclusions. There's the big old 30 cents level or thereabouts, which is probably one of the least attractive areas to start selling, because it's pretty much the only support. But at the same time, even if it does start bouncing, like, what are you going to do with that bounce? And you've got good reasons to doubt that that's going to be the bottom, or that even just the more positive view that even if it is the bottom, it's going to take a while to resolve. And I kind of share your conclusions in that as well. In that, I think knife catching and buying strong dips of this instrument is a pretty hard trade a lot of the time, and momentum continuation is just easier and worth waiting for more often than not. I mean, I'm just looking at this XRP USD chart. It doesn't look easy to trade. It straight up doesn't. Just looking at this price action on the weekly time frame. I mean, maybe the lower time frames are different, but it's not particularly nice. So we know that the Bitcoin pair has got like resistance at that kind of market structure level that we talked about, and then the USD pair has got, it's at support, sure, but it's also got resistance basically where the breakdown occurred, right? Or around that market structure level at 43, 45 or thereabouts. I think if you're bullish XRP, or you want to be bullish XRP, I would personally, first of all, wait, because I think there is a fair bit of regulatory uncertainty. And second of all, just as before, I'd wanted to actually start reclaiming levels and see fresh buyers step in and existing participants not using every bounce as an exit opportunity. And reclaiming old levels is pretty reliable as far as that sort of thing goes. I also share a conclusion. I don't think XRP is going anywhere per se. It's, they've got deep pockets. They've got the corporate game down to a T with all their former, SEC commissioners and stuff, so-called unpaid advisors. shaking a stick at the current SEC and all that type of stuff. So it's not going anywhere. I just think the easier long side opportunities and such a bullish trend probably aren't in this instrument until the dust settles a little bit.
Yep. And then, I mean, it's going to be interesting to pick it up again.
Yeah.
It's a little bit rough if it does get delisted, because I'd be surprised if it does get delisted and just relisted again.
Yeah, that'd be weird, wouldn't it? Maybe if they settle or they win, but I don't know. I mean, they're probably going to settle. Like, I can't imagine another legal outcome. But I don't know if settlement would be enough for relisting. Maybe, God knows. That's not a question that I'm particularly comfortable answering. So yeah, that's Ripple. XRP BTC looks rough. Even if it bounces 20-30%, I mean, finding resistance near cycle lows just isn't great. For the USD pair, 30 cents support holding is a nice development, but then it honestly just could come back and retest it or form a range here. I don't think the fact that it retested this and bounced is just like an all-in signal in itself. I'd wait for the dust to settle and kind of see where things are in terms of both the regulatory perspective, but also straight up major listings, and then kind of go from there.
I mean,
go on.
Sorry. I mean, if you look at the XRP BTC pair, right, it's been in a downtrend forever. So it's kind of like, it's always this thing with the altcoins that, like, you really want to get this bottom long in because, I mean, the gains are going to be insane. But, I mean, if you think about it, this has been downtrending, right? Yeah. And this didn't really break anything. It didn't even close back above here.
It's one thing we asked for, Duck. One fucking level.
Yeah, it's the one thing that had to happen. But this is generally a downtrend, right? And as easy as it is to say, okay, Bitcoin is trending up, I mean, you don't have to look for the tops. You can just wait and see. And once the top develops, you buy buy the dip and then sell the bounce and then maybe hedge at some point. It's the same thing here, where you're like guessing the bottom of this thing. It's a pretty aggressive move already. So it's kind of like the altcoins in general, they're making new lows, breaking down yesterday or the day before. So you kind of have like this altcoin situation where pretty much every altcoin is suffering besides Litecoin. I'm going to talk about Litecoin too. But yeah, pretty much every altcoin is suffering. And then, yeah, it just doesn't... Like when you have a weak pair like XRP in a sea of other altcoins that are also really, really weak, it's just not something that I want to trade on the long side.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, look, if the market's giving you much more attractive altcoin setups without the risk of delisting or FUD or whatever you want to call it, I think the volatility is good for maybe really short-term traders playing those bounces, mean reversions, etc. But I think for high conviction type of positioning, probably not the best set of circumstances. One thing I wanted to touch on, by the way, can you say something? I think I may have muted you.
Really?
Okay, no, you're good. Yeah, I accidentally clicked on this thing, but it says you can't unmute someone else's presentation. So no, we're fine. We discussed kind of altcoins taking a huge shit on the day of the XRP nuked. Yeah. People are asking whether that's a kind of correlated move, if it's liquidations, if it's just kind of a risk-off sort of thing with altcoins just being led by XRP. Do you have a personal view or thesis as to... I mean, literally, if you look at some of the DeFi stuff, those wicks are crazy, right? We're talking like 30, 40, 50% on some of them, which have been retraced, which is even more insane. But we certainly saw altcoins took a beating along with XRP on that day. What's your take? And then we can talk about Litecoin.
I think it's pretty much everything you said. It's people risking off because obviously, I mean, altcoins haven't done too well, and then you see another altcoin get sued. You don't want to see that as a holder, right? Mm-hmm. So it makes sense to kind of de-risk. I think the wicks that we've seen, most likely, in my opinion, like I said, I haven't been on the screens for too long, but the thing that makes the most sense to me is just someone that held both XRP and other altcoin longs at the same time, and then they got liquidated on the XRP long, and then that just snowballed, made them force sell everything else. Like that's the one thing I could imagine that would explain most of the wicking that went on, because a few forced sells can do that to like an illiquid altcoin. but yeah, I think it's all of the things
All
you
of the
mentioned,
above, yeah.
and obviously that on top, like that is one thing that people often like. I all the time I see this kind of stuff where people have these kind of like on Binance, for example, they have like this box of like 1 million altcoin longs.
I know what you're referencing, but yeah, go on.
And then they have like the liquidation prices here, and they're like, look at me, my liquidation price is 10% away. I am like a responsible person for all of them, right? So it's like, okay, if this coin goes down 10%, I'm going to get liquidated, but that's not going to happen, right? And then this same thing. And then they have this on cross leverage,
Right.
where when one of these coins goes down significantly, the liquidation price of the other coins goes down as well, or like up in this
Moves
case.
closer to you, yeah.
Yeah, it moves closer to you. So you get like, if you get liquidated on one, you get liquidated on all of them. And that is something that I've seen like being advertised on Twitter, just long the whole bunch, and not realizing that the moment you do that, if one of them, or like if all of them move lower, you actually like your liquidation price actually moves against you as well. So you just get like rolled over. And I think that is one of the things that kind of added on top, because people just like to long 1 million things, not thinking about, okay, what happens if one of these goes down 40%? Do I get instantly liquidated in all of them? The answer is yes, you do.
Can you imagine tracking the maintenance margin on so many fucking positions? Must be insane. You don't even, and a lot of them just aren't that, order book depth or liquidity, whatever, is trash as well. So you don't even know realistically where you could be exiting and your market impact. And yeah, it's really difficult. It's certainly not for everyone. My personal view, I mean, I agree with all the above, liquidations and cross portfolios getting rolled, general risk off in altcoins. I also think it wouldn't be unreasonable or beyond the realms of possibility that there are certain systems that people might employ, be it automated or not, which dictate altcoin risk based on a basket of majors, right? And XRP, if I imagine in most of those systems, would be part of that index. And when something gets nuked that hard, I imagine it just, that was a causal factor in the altcoin cascade more generally. When that constituent of a so-called altcoin index goes so out of whack, I could see that being an impetus for risk off as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see where that ends up. A lot of the retraces were pretty fucking impressive. But that's kind of expected when price reaches areas where, I mean, there are just no participants down there type of thing. Or someone really gobbling a lot of it up. I think there was some really interesting analysis done on FTX versus Binance open interest when Sushi nuked. I think Hisaka was tweeting it and someone else, but it looks like our good old friends at FTX were hoovering up the Sushi licks on Binance. Meanwhile, the FTX licks, I mean, generally were way lower. So there's some pretty interesting stuff going on, but the recovery's been quite impressive, all things considered.
Yeah. But I mean, then again, like it makes sense that the recovery is quick, because if it's really what I think it was, which I mean, I have no way of confirming, just based on the fact that, like I said, I haven't really been spending much time looking into it. But like, if it's a person that just kind of gets rolled over on leverage, right, and just pushes the price down, and I mean, the fact, like on Sushi, for example, that the one that you've shown, that Sushi traded, I think, like 10% or something below spot, or 15% below spot. At the lows, this kind of shows like, okay, it's driven by liquidations, but I still think like it's pretty dangerous. Like a lot of people look at these recoveries and are like, okay, yeah, this is just gonna moon now, just based on the fact that there's a wick there. If there's no spot demand coming in for these altcoins, they're not gonna moon. And I think if Bitcoin just moves further up, there's a good chance that we actually take out the wicks on a lot of these coins. And if you like position too aggressively, just based on the fact that you're like, oh, these stops got hunted, whatever. I don't know. I don't really like that kind of aggressive movement into altcoins while Bitcoin is doing all-time highs. Yeah. Could be the play. I'm personally just not really into that. The only thing where where I'm seeing massive strength is in Litecoin. It's one that that I'm pretty sad about, because I had a Litecoin position pretty low. I bought pretty much the lows. It moved up. It moved a little bit lower. I sold again because I was kind of worried where the altcoins were going. And I mean, for good reason, right? I mean, you saw these 60% wicks on these. And the only thing that didn't die off of the XRP move down was Litecoin. So I saw strength in Litecoin, positioned myself in it. It went up. I got worried about altcoins, just cut all my altcoin positions. And then a few days after, you get these 60% movements down. The only thing that didn't go down and the only thing that didn't give me a re-entry is Litecoin. So, I mean...
yeah, that's fun, isn't it?
Yeah, but at least I picked right? Because, I mean, you can kind of see my argument still where Litecoin is showing strength for everything else is showing weakness. So, I mean, at least a consolidation price is that I was right about that. It's just I'm pretty sad that it didn't quite go where I wanted to.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point that sometimes just literally going on the front page of CoinGecko when the market's red and seeing which mid-high caps are actually holding their own, that information isn't just useful on that day, but it's useful on the following days for the next moves as well. Because you were onto Litecoin pretty early on, and then when everything nuked, it wasn't like on that same day. There's like maybe within a week or just generally what's indicating strength at that moment. So it's pretty useful just as a general tip. Even when the market's nuking, see what's nuking the least, and then when the market bounces, they'll probably bounce the hardest. With some exceptions, obviously, but that's... You're basically looking for strength before the market has a chance to actually be strong, you know? It's strength by virtue of being not as weak as everything else, I suppose. I wanted to talk about Russian Ethereum. The USD pair and the BTC pair. So, I mean, for me, the USD pair still looks decent, all things considered. Again, sure, scary daily candles, etc. But something we spoke about on Monday, and I'm sure I get to cover again on Monday, is daily market structure, whereby you had, you know, high, low, equal or higher high, higher low, and then another higher high. And then when we were here, the question was, well, okay, where are higher low candidates or retest areas, etc. Generally expecting market structure to remain intact as long as this... I don't know why that's so thick. Hold on. As long as the swing low isn't broken, right? So as long as that pattern is intact, looking for a higher low on some sort of dip. And we seem to have got it, right? It doesn't look A+ at the moment, but it bounced. I mean, look, this move was... ETH wasn't spared during the XRP dump, but at the moment, if it manages to get back above pretty much the breakout retest level, the top of the range, which it's trying to do right now, I think that looks good. Should that be the case, you've had your level of resistance, the higher high, big uncomfortable move down along with XRP, etc., which is still landed in an area that we were paying attention to for a potential higher low. And then if that reclaims the top of the range again, I think that's a good argument for this being another higher low set and continuation higher. I think the only thing that's making me cautious, I mean, look, daily hasn't closed, etc., but also there is monthly resistance up here around 700. But generally, if we're just looking at this time frame in isolation, it doesn't look too bad, as long as, I think on the newsletter as well, it's like 617, which is the current price right now. As long as, you know, the breakout level gets flipped, then I think there's a good chance that this is the higher low before heading higher. Although, again, same caveat that there's a trouble area a bit closer than, say, for Bitcoin. And then for ETH BTC, I mean, it looks rough on the daily time frame, right? But kind of where
rough, yeah.
it's rough on the daily time frame, but where it's landed is I think is a pretty tricky area to trade, at least on the bearish side, because it's retesting a lot of the whatever market structure breakout type of levels. Is that significant in itself? I mean, not necessarily. It could even just spend weeks here with ETH generally underperforming, but in those cases when I think the meat of the move has likely happened and it's approaching these kind of bounce candidates, I'd probably just pay attention more to the USD pairs as opposed to letting the index guide which side I want to punt. Jeff, what do you think about USD pair, BTC pair, all that stuff?
I don't like the USD pair too much. It depends on how you draw this resistance, but I'd say like in general, you have this resistance. I mean, you have the same thing.
Yeah.
I think we're still pretty much in that.
Yeah.
The crazy part is ETH is showing massive weakness whenever Bitcoin goes up, right? So it's kind of like if you're longing ETH, and I mean, you can see that right now, right? So Bitcoin in the last 4 hours, just 4 candles upwards, right? And then you look at ETH and you see this. So it's kind of rough. I don't really see too big of a need. Like if I'm bullish the crypto market, I want to long Bitcoin instead of ETH. And if I'm bearish, I think there's a good chance like if they go down together. So like if I had to make a choice, like even though Bitcoin is nowhere, like in the middle of nowhere for me, I'd much rather like just log into any margin trade exchange and just long Bitcoin over ETH. Yeah. That said, I mean, if it does reclaim on the ETH BTC pair, if it does reclaim this kind of lost support, that might change. But I still don't like this. Looks pretty bad to me. Like we've broken, or at least like for now, we've retested this so many times. This should have held, in my opinion. We've had the bounce from the level. That should have had follow through if it was bullish. That said, like, yeah, this is support. So if you bounce here, go back above this screen level. Excuse all the drawings. But yeah, if you go back there, I'm gonna be all aboard the Russian ETH train. It's fine by me. But like this just looks terrible to me. Like I don't really see. Like a lot of people are talking about how good ETH looks every time it bounces. Like I mean, I don't like. What is this? This is the daily candle yesterday where you had like people talking about alt season, and this is nothing, right? What you want to see are like these kind of moves when people are talking about alt season, because when you get these small candles and people start talking about alt season, you know they're in trouble, right? When you see these ones, you know that they're euphoric because you actually get some good price movement. So I don't know. I'm not sold on ETH. I don't really see a reason why this should be the bottom. I want to see some positive action first, and that would have to be reclaim of at least this weekly zone, which so far hasn't happened yet. Even more, like there has been opportunity, right? This wick to the downside yesterday, like when people see these kind of wicks, they assume capitulation, which I mean, fair. When you get these large wicks, that can be capitulation. But usually when you get these wicks and the market is bullish, what you get is you get the wick to the downside. Someone gets completely wrecked, or a lot of people get completely wrecked. And then you catapult upwards and then just run, right? And that could have happened yesterday. This could have gone and just gone vertical here, but it didn't. What it did was it broke down, bounced a tiny bit in comparison to this drop. I mean, you can barely see the bounce in comparison to the drop. And is now just heading lower again. So not entirely sold on ETH. I don't see too much strength there. I'd be much, much happier to buy if it kind of moves from here above resistance, and then that's completely fine by me. The problem with ETH USD and like bearish, like you're like, oh, ETH BTC looks pretty rough. I think this goes down, right? If you look at ETH USD, this could easily be pulled up by Bitcoin no matter what happens. You can have
been for a ton of this rally, right? I mean, looking at ETH BTC.
Yeah, so it's kind of like if you're shorting this, you're betting also on a Bitcoin breakdown, just based on the fact that ETH USD is not gonna go down significantly when Bitcoin is rallying. It's just not like it's rarely happens like that. Yeah. The only kind of coin that has been able to pull that off has been Link, and where you had like Bitcoin break all-time high after all-time high and Link just didn't move. That is not the case for ETH. ETH has a little bit more strength than that.
Yeah.
So that is kind of my view on ETH. I mean, there's not too much to act on, just based on the fact that, yeah, you're pretty high up already. But I mean, that doesn't really matter. The thing that matters more is that just ETH BTC looks rough, and it's not in an area where I would want to bet on the entire trend reversing, which we've had for weeks now, like this downwards trend.
Yeah. I think even if you get bounces, like by definition, until they do something meaningful, their counter trend, right? And yeah, it's very much still a case of if Bitcoin continues to look like this, altcoins will probably continue to be threatened, and that to a large extent includes ETH and ETH BTC. So that Bitcoin trading higher, it drags ETH USD, which kind of underperforms by definition. And so the easier trade was either just doing nothing or being long Bitcoin rather than being long the lagging pair, so to speak.
Yep.
I think that's a pretty fair summary. And yeah, I agree. These don't tend to diverge too much. I think Bitcoin's done a better job of dragging ETH than ETH did a job of dragging Bitcoin when we had that rally and whenever the fuck that was. But yeah, look, if you want to express your bullish views, probably better done via Bitcoin, I think, is the argument. And if you want to express it via altcoins, there's a chance that not only do they underperform, but they actually just go down instead of not being as bullish as Bitcoin, right? I think generally having high, conviction views on altcoins for the time being, I'd personally be waiting for the market to turn bearish, and then I'd really expect altcoins to take a huge shit. But kind of using altcoins as a proxy to chase strength when Bitcoin looks like this, I think is how you get burned, you know? I agree with most of that, or pretty much all of it. But yeah, just commenting on, with this level, with this breakout, etc., it could just be a nothing burger chop and then gets dragged wherever Bitcoin goes. That's pretty likely to, as far as these things go. Do you want to talk about Link? Because for me, I had 2 weekly levels on Link, and there was a bit of a range there. So one of it is the weekly between 15 and 16, which is this cluster here, and then the other between 7.5 and basically 8. And this, obviously, the altcoin moves were a bit crazy when the XRP thing happened, and Link actually technically hit the bottom of that cluster and closed. I mean, slap bang in the middle of the range, which is a bit insane. I think you said something very valuable, that a lot of the time people maybe are conditioned to just look at wicks and think, oh, well, every long got stopped out, huge liquidity run, etc., etc. But that's not always necessarily true, right? And a lot of the time what we've seen, and I agree, it's just price comes back and fills the wick, or makes some sort of higher low on most of that wick before actually moving away. So anyone who trades this type of price action and says, well, okay, so therefore I'm going to, long the close of this bullish candle and put a stop at the low because it's a stop run, I think that's one of the worst trades ever, personally. I'd rather either do business on some sort of continuation through the level once it actually gets going, or back when it's filled in most of the wick and a lot of the chasers higher up have puked out and I get to actually trade support. Outside the appropriate context, I think just these long wicks tend to be anomalous and suggestive of order book depth, liquidity, etc., more so than actual, oh, look, everyone stopped out, SFP, therefore the market's bullish. So technically this range is still intact, and if you look at where price is now, again, it's right in the middle. So no huge views on Link USD, at least for me. On the Bitcoin pair, I'm really looking forward to see how this develops, because it's a huge weekly level here at 50k, more or less. And in a very similar fashion, it pretty much went from one range boundary. We wrote about on Tuesday how there's like a 30% haircut. If one level fails, range high, the next range low is like, 32% below it, and it came within a couple of percentage points on that same day, which is insane. But I think the similar type of logic applies in terms of where does the dust settle. I still think if it closes back within or fails to flip the top of this breakout level to support, we'll see an almost ETH BTC-esque or maybe XRP BTC-esque pattern where you get a low time frame bounce to retest this, but ultimately it floats lower down towards the range low or most of the wick. Again, I just really don't want to see a close back below 50, because for me, again, just like in the newsletter, that's a kind of, that's just a shitty chart, man. I don't want to dice words at that point. Any thoughts on Link?
Yeah, I mean, I've been trading Link a little bit more than I have even ETH in the last few weeks. I kind of agree with your point where it's just like these kind of wicks are illiquid. It's no coin. So when you start moving big time, market makers just pull the liquidity and then it just disappears. That's kind of what happened on Chainlink. And I like, even if you like ignore any, like all these candles, like the fact that we're trading and maintaining these kind of levels is bearish to me. And I mean, I've been saying Link is pretty damn weak for, I don't know, for weeks now. And it's still the same, right? Just based on, oh, there's a wick here, doesn't change too much on the fact that we're actually trading below this low here. And we're trading, and we've broken the area that we should have held as support. And Bitcoin's at all-time high, and Link is quite far from it. So not too fond of Link myself. I just like, you see this wick, like, oh, this is mega bullish. Doesn't have to be. I think the one thing where it could actually turn around is if it starts trading back above 12. And I mean, that's not too far away. That's just like, you miss out on what, 10%? And the risk in here is so significant. I mean, for me, like, if I wanted to take a Link position here, it 100% be a short, and then you just do this kind of trade and trade it to range low. Now, is that gonna play out if Bitcoin's bullish? I mean, I doubt so. So you would kind of have to be a little bit careful. But that would be the trade. If I had to take a trade right now, that would be the trade that I would take. And it's not, oh, there's a wick here, so I'm gonna do this. Long here, stop loss below the wick, target
something
whatever.
To make it 2.0.
Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. It makes a lot of sense. Like, let's say we start trading above 12.5, then you can have, like, maybe if you get a move like this and then actually start breaking out, then you have your kind of invalidation down here, much tighter setup, an actual reason to be bullish. Because I really think, like, if this is bearish, we shouldn't trade back into the green zone again. And if it's bullish, it really shouldn't have done this. Like, this is just a bearish looking chart, and it's just trading bearishly, and that wick doesn't change too much on that front.
I just actually hate getting long when that's left below me. I really fucking hate it. Because I know that a bunch of chumps are going to use that as a stop. And so the market tends to... So I love trading either, like, well away from the wick, just like in your case, continuation through it. Because if it's a real kind of quote-unquote capitulation wick, the market should absolutely go fucking flying from that point, right? And find no resistance whatsoever. Whereas if it's that type of illiquid, everything sold off, so this just sold off more, and, liquidity was pulled, or whatever, the conditions were just far worse... and then you start trading, and that's like a 20-30% wick, and you start getting long into structure or in the middle of nowhere with that left below you. It just sucks. It doesn't make for good trading or for good risk definition. So I think it's a great kind of framework. When you get those sorts of deep wicks, trading momentum continuation through structure is usually the better trade and the more risk-defined trade, rather than trading because the wick exists, right? I'm afraid, especially if it's, again, on one of those days where it's not unique to this instrument and just the whole market gets wiped, liquidity gets pulled, and you get those sorts of moves, that's not bullish in itself, unless you're trading within the actual wick, which most people aren't.
I think in general with these kind of moves, it's like anything else. I like to say this a lot, just based on, like, it's helped me a shit ton trading, is when you see, like, you look at this, right? You see this wick, and this candle just closed up here. I mean, that people are going to see this wick and absolutely going to panic buy this, right? So you anticipate, okay, the narrative, okay, people are going to buy this wick. And then you buy this and sell it into the rip, right? That is something that you can get even if you buy down here and you see, like, the bids come back in, and you play this kind of stuff before everyone else does, right? That's completely fine by me. The problem that I have with this kind of wick trading is that the most people that trade it are the people that are afraid to buy it here, and then they see the wick now, like 2 days after the fact, like after the news basically, and then they get hyper bullish, which, I mean, you can be hyper bullish here, right? I mean, there's a setup to be had. It's not a good one anymore. No. Just like everyone that's already, like, is gonna FOMO buy that wick's already done so. So, I mean, if you see altcoin strength come back into the market, Link's obviously gonna do well, right? So it kind of depends on that. But in general, it's like either you front run these things or you don't trade them all at all, in my opinion. You see that wick, it wicks really low, it looks like it's going to zero, and you buy into it, and then it bounces, then you do the right thing. But if you're like, okay, this went to almost zero, bounced a shitload, and it's an altcoin, and then I'm buying into that, it's a bit aggressive for me. But then again, we've had a similar situation with Bitcoin, so maybe people are right that are doing it. Like, we've had this massive shakeout into a bounce, a giant one. But even here, we have this kind of return.
Filled in, like that candle body at the very least. But yeah,
so,
I agree. It's not straightforward. I just think for the most part, it ends up making for a really shitty trade. Like, if you see the chart and you see the big wick and like all that sequence of price action is over, and like you just get long or get short just there and then because of the wick and not because of any other structure or timing or whatever, like it's probably going to be a slower moving / shitty trade. And if it's not, well then why not wait for the aggressive momentum continuation, and then you get tighter stop placement and a better trade anatomy, right? Just seems reasonable. So even looking at the Bitcoin pair on the daily time frame, we know that we have this weekly structure, area, breakout level, etc. And that's where the market is right now. You know, support is really far away, pretty much where we wicked, but resistance is nearby. So kind of the wick trade here, where let's say you're entering on the close and you've got your stop, let's say at the low, right? That's technically where you're invalidated because that was the big shakeout, etc., etc. But then you've got like no upside to capture there. Whereas if you get, for example, if you want to wait and let the market come to you, right? And you get this sort of breakout and then either consolidation or pullback, well, at that point, your risk definition moves from this low to the actual kind of breakout type of structure or level. So then you have a trade where you've got an entry kind of at structure, a stop loss reasonably nearby, and then you know that that wick was actually meaningful and you likely have momentum on your side as well. So even waiting that little bit for that FTA break is, I think, makes a huge difference for trade parameters.
Yeah. I think in general, that's a good kind of rule of thumb. Like, if you want to FOMO into it at like that kind of resistance, at least set yourself this kind of one thing it has to pass.
Minimum requirement or something.
Yeah, minimum requirement. I like that. Where it's like, okay, this could be bullish, and I'm like I said, doesn't have to be bearish. It's just like, this is clearly a bearish trend. It's clearly like not really putting any momentum in after this. Could come in the next 2 days, and then I'll change my tune. But for me, like even on Link BTC, like above this green level, and we can fly. I think there's a good chance that it like almost doubles
like a
from
6K
there.
equivalent, I think.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, put yourself into like this position where like, okay, this really like it shouldn't go back above here if it's bullish. And I'm not gonna be the guy that FOMOs into after a big move to the upside. I'm gonna be the guy that is actually FOMOing into a move where we reclaim a resistance that we shouldn't have. Because, I mean, at that point, the bears are wrong, in my opinion, up here. And here, it just looks like, I mean, this looks like a bubble pop. I've been saying this for weeks now. And the bad part is, like, me saying this, like, over and over and over again, I'm going to be wrong one time, and I'm going to hear shit for it forever. But I still keep saying it, like I've been saying since up here. This looks like a typical kind of bubble to me that is deflating and that is gonna find the bottom just like Bitcoin did after 6K. So I think Link is just gonna do maybe range down here and then continue up, but I don't think it's gonna be a quick one. So for me, Link is still the one. Like, if I wanted to short an altcoin, Link would be the one. In general, just based on the fact that it's already went through its market cycle, where the other ones, like, I mean, for example, Litecoin is just chilling near cycle lows. It's very different from this.
You've got DeFi stuff, new stuff that's breaking all-time high, right? With narratives.
Those haven't really done a market cycle yet. Yeah. If you look at the DeFi stuff, they haven't done a market cycle. This has done one. And I mean, now, like, I've been saying this for weeks now, but now it's very, very apparent, in my opinion. Like, you can't argue that this is kind of a part of the market cycle. So you've had this this expansion of, consolidation down here, expansion to the upside, and then breakdown. This is kind of the move into the first kind of bear market for Link, right? Can that be reversed? Obviously, but for it to do so, it has to reclaim stuff, and it has to put in some work. And chasing these things when they just this breakdown, you could argue, was where it started turning bearish.
Mm-hmm.
It's been bearish for a longer time for me, but in general, structurally wise, you have a low here, you have a high here, you have a higher low here. You never manage to break that high up here.
Yeah.
You break the low. So this is a downtrend now. And who knows where the lower high is going to come in? Is it going to come in here, or is it going to come in after a crash down and then you get it here? You don't know yet, but whoops. But yeah, it doesn't make much sense to go all aggressive on it for me. Just yet. If it does put in some positive action, I'm all for it. I'd love to trade Link on the bullish side again, even more so because now I'm familiar with how it trades, just based on the fact that I've been trading this on the bear side for, how long is it now? Yeah, 4 months. So yeah, I kind of feel familiar with this, and looking forward to trading it in the next bull run. Just don't know when that's gonna be.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, even from a basic SR point of view, right? Top of the range, expected to be support. We'll see. Bottom of the range, that's the target if the top of the range fails. And then you've got an in-between trouble area type of resistance where you had the breakdown in between. So you have A, B, and C. So the easier places, or the easiest places to be bullish is between A and B is okay, and then the reclaim of B is probably quite a big one, where that floor, which led to the fallout, tests the range high, get back above that, and then you're in flying territory, because there's no real resistance that's particularly good that was made on the way down. But those are the easier and higher probability bullish trades. Here, where support is God knows where, and resistance is potentially just overhead, given the top of the range, it's just really hard to play on the bullish side, I think. And I agree with you. I'd love to play Link in that direction, especially if it resumes any of its former glory, where just longing Link, you couldn't go wrong. But I think with altcoins generally, and with Bitcoin already looking as threatening as it is, waiting for a bit more evidence isn't the most aggressive thing in the world. And who cares if you miss the bottom, right? Bitcoin, the traders who bought above 6, above 8, above 10, I'm almost certain anecdotally have done better than those who bought 3, 4, and 5. The traders, because they had an easier time holding and just less MAE, all that type of stuff. So the easiest or the best paying long entries aren't always the lowest or cheapest entries, in my opinion.
I actually like that a lot, because back when I bought 4K, I shat my pants, and that kind of that spooked me out a lot, and that kind of screwed with my trading after. So can't say I disagree with that.
Yeah, sometimes you have to pay up to have a good entry that's easy to manage. The one good call I've made in 3 years, 4 years or whatever, of being on crypto Twitter is buy above 6K and not below it. And all the chads who bought above 6K, no matter what it was, 6, 7, 8, they just pretty much watched the market double, more or less, up to wherever that last other top came in at 14, 15, as opposed to those who, maybe bought near the low, but then just couldn't stomach the months or the weeks of chop that followed. Or maybe they bought 3 and 4 but then sold at 6 and didn't buy back, type of thing. So it's kind of worth considering what's the anatomy of the trade that I'm taking, and more specifically, how easy do I expect the market to be if I'm correct. So something which I don't remember where I read it, but I don't always agree, but sometimes the best entry is kind of the latest entry, or the last one. We pretty much don't have to stomach any retests or ranges, consolidations. You're either right or you're wrong in a very short space of time. And less time in a trade, a lot of the time, makes for easier management, even if the entry isn't as good as perhaps another trade. Who knows? Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And everyone knows the feeling when you're stuck in a trade for a week and you just turn insane. I've been stuck in a short-term trade for a week before, where I'm this just not moved. Bitcoin back in the day, It's like you're in this short-term trade. You look at this. You're in this from like down at like 6K ish, and you're trying to kind of take this to wherever, like the next resistance, and it just literally puts in this. That is agonizing.
I remember that price action so much. Like that daily candle with the tall wick in October or whatever. Yeah. I literally remember like looking at my phone. Oh, dude,
that was on Bitfinex. Like that was Bitfinex just going completely nuts.
That's the one. Yeah, dude. I have some awful memories of that.
I actually have like really good memories of this because I like giga longed. I giga longed down here, and I still remember this to this day because it's so hilarious. So such a hilarious story. So I bought this dump, right? Like literally into the dump. Didn't get like near the bottom, but anywhere. Like I think like pretty much at the candle close. With Salsa Tequila, it's always already been on the channel. Most people should know him. And then it was kind of like, I think we bought up here. I don't know. Like it was a really good price in hindsight, right? But so price moved up a little bit and then moved against us here. And he literally like, this candle came and he wrote like, what the fuck? He went completely nuts, right? And I was like, oh shit, he made a shitload of money. And he sent me, I got liquidated. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like we're both long from here. Like how can you be liquidated? And that was after the move down. So like it moved down and then up or something. But like he got liquidated here, had to chase the move or something. I think that was that candle. Either it was this one or was this one. But like that story always remains in my head because it's so fucking funny. And I just went to almost like 6, 7, 8K. And then it's kind of crazy because he went from trading like that to like one of the best traders that I know. So props to him for kind of making it all work.
And yeah, those who haven't listened to the Casual Friday with Salsa, make sure you do. There's a lot of good stuff there. I don't know, dude. I look at the Bitcoin daily chart and the weekly chart and the high time frames. I can literally remember like where I was for most of these moves and how I felt and how I traded them. It's just crazy how, we're able to look back on this in 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years and literally say, yeah, I remember this move. Isn't that crazy? I don't know. Maybe I'm just romanticizing the experience, but I think there's something valuable in doing that. Unless you just lose everything, in which case you never want to see it again.
Yeah, I've seen like I've retweeted a thread about a person that just lost everything in trading. Mm-hmm. So I mean, just recently actually on my Twitter, that can happen if you're too aggressive, if you're using too much leverage.
Yeah,
and I mean it can happen to anyone really. So always be on guard. The biggest enemy that you have in trading is yourself. Yeah, in my opinion.
Now that Arthur Hayes isn't hiding,
yeah. Yep.
Speaking of leverage, just a very quick kind of, not really announcement per se, but the Duck and I are working on, or are going to start work on basically, I suppose it's a cryptocurrency margin trading guide, right? Which isn't so much about strategies, but just about how actual margin trading works. What it is, different types of futures and order types, what leverage is, liquidation, funding, cost of trading. I mean, I've broadly got the outline here. And you can see, I mean, this is just literally from today. But this is some of the stuff we talked about. Intro, futures, spot, etc. Different types and collateral, how you get paid out, P&L curves, what are different order types, what they mean. So this should be quite good, actually. This should be quite good. I don't know when it's going to come out. The way these things work is you start working on them with a plan, and then as you write, like let's say the first 10%, you realize there's a whole other section you have to write for that to make sense, and it kind of just snowballs into something much beyond the original conception. But for now, this is like a rough outline, but we want it to become a very often referenced text, especially for people new to leverage, beginners, etc., that when you have a friend who wants to get into margin trading or someone asks how much leverage do you use or other type of questions which don't make a lot of sense, or what's funding, or why did I get liquidated, why is my liquidation price moving, all of that type of stuff. What's the difference between isolated and cross, and so on and so forth. We want to just have one place, one document, where you can, both for yourself and for your friends and for anyone else, just kind of give it to them and know that it's coming from a decent enough and accessible place. So that's, keep an eye out for that in the next, I don't know, Don, you know how I work. I'll do nothing for a week, and then one day I'll do 80% of it, and it's really good.
Yeah, this one's going to be huge. I think that's going to take at least a month. But
yeah,
I mean, I always say it's going to take longer than it does. I try to at least.
Yeah, but I always undershoot. So maybe we just take an average.
I'm down with that. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I think the one thing, like, I've talked with a good friend of mine that trades really well, and he told me, I always put my stop at like, I don't really use stops. I just like use liquidation price for that. Just make like a smaller account get liquidated every time I'm wrong. And I was like, you do realize that you're losing like 80%, like, or depending on your leverage, like a shitload of what you have in the account to like fees and everything else. And he was like, yeah, but it's not that big. And then I did the calculation for him, and he was like, okay, shit. Because I mean, you lose it if you don't know how to use these tools. I mean, your edge just erodes away. Like, there's people that would be profitable that are just using the stuff that's offered to them wrong.
Yeah.
And then they just turn, obviously, like, I couldn't trade like that. Like, I'd never have been profitable if I just used my liquidation as my stop. Like, it just doesn't work.
You get liquidated well before, right?
Yeah. You just give away a shitload. I've written an article about it. It's
that's still the case. Yeah.
And this kind of stuff, like, you need to know, like, if you're doing something, it's kind of obvious in any other topic that you kind of approach, that you kind of know, like, if you have a tool, you know how it's used.
Yeah.
In crypto, it's not really the case. Like, people know how this chart works, but they don't know how to actually use the platform, or like, not even the platform, but like in general, how trading works, what a long is, what a short is, like when it comes down to the details.
Yeah,
and if
different
you don't
order types, what they mean and shit. Like, yeah, if you went for like 100 people and you asked them, have you ever read the like contract specs of the instruments where you donate like tens of thousands of dollars per month? It's like, have you ever actually read the contract specs for like how your maintenance margin, for example, is calculated, all that type of stuff? Maybe 1 in 10 will have done it.
I don't even think that much.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But that's, hopefully, we're going to seek to address some of that in the document, although it's no replacement for actually going and learning, because every exchange is different and has its own nuances, etc. But we'll try to make some progress on that front. But yeah, that's something to look forward to on the content side of things. And also, the newsletter has had a really big upgrade, or we feel it is, and the feedback has been really positive. So if you haven't checked that out, just go on to my Twitter, and one of my most recent tweets is a link to the newsletter itself. So check it out. We just think it's better, and we'd love your feedback either way. But I think that's all we've got for this special Christmas episode. Thank you to our friends over at Bybit for sponsoring the channel, and of course, thank you all for joining us on this special day, and hope you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year as well, although I'll be seeing you before that. Duck, as well, thanks as always, and any final parting wisdom, comments, whatever, before we let these people go to their loving families, unlike us?
No, not really. I wish you all a Merry Christmas. Do enjoy it if you can. If you can't, if you're stuck at home and can't even visit your family, some people can't. Just keep yourself above water, doing something else.
Maybe read the contract specs for your future trading platform.
That sounds like a good plan. Or just do something where you can kind of take your mind off.
Play Cyberpunk. I think it's really good. I've got like 70 hours in a week. It's
oh yeah,
nice.
That's what I'm gonna do at some point once I get my new graphics card.
Yeah,
but yeah,
should have asked Santa.
Yeah, you don't get one even if you ask Santa.
Yeah, Santa's dealing with the supply crisis just like we all are.
Yeah, but thanks for coming by, guys. I really appreciate it. And I think we'll see each other either for Cred on Monday or for me on Wednesday. Looking forward to it.
Merry Christmas. Thank you, and see you soon.
Bye-bye.